Chapter 18, Safariland. I found Doc out at the farthest east at Safariland, where he'd just overseen the birth of a wildebeest. He was sitting in the shade of a cedar tree, watching the baby struggle to its feet for the first time. Despite such a joyous event, he appeared quite sad, his eyes rimmed with red, as though he was close to crying. He'd skipped the funeral, of course. Doc knew the whole thing was a sham, and would have had no tolerance for it. It hadn't been too hard to find him, even though I shouldn't have shown my face inside of the park. I'd simply called the vet hospital looking for him. Roz was at the funeral, which was probably lucky for me. I was afraid she might recognize my voice and alert Buck. Instead, there was a temp who happily informed me where Doc had gone. Safariland was the easiest part of Fun Jungle to sneak into. Given its massive size, it was difficult for security to patrol. I circled through the woods to the back fence and found a place where I could scramble up a tree and drop over. Then I just snuck around until I spotted Doc's truck. Much of the time I was right out in the open, but I was so far from the viewing areas no one could tell I was only a kid. Instead, everyone probably assumed I was one of the keepers who occasionally wandered through. To my surprise, Doc showed none of the gruffness he usually greeted me with. Instead, he appeared strangely relieved to see me. "How'd you get here?" "Buck's turning his whole county looking for you." "How'd you know?" "It's all over the park's radio channel. His men are combing the woods, the trailer park, everything." "They got Mom and Dad." Doc nodded sadly. "I heard that, too. JJ's saying they're members of the ALF, but they're not." "I know. I'm sorry. I had no idea this would have happened. Otherwise, I'd never have..." He trailed off, at a loss for words. Suddenly, I understood. "You knew I was in the auditorium during the autopsy, didn't you?" Doc nodded. "I saw you up in the lighting grid after you made that noise. I knew Martin would prevent me from doing anything with the information that Henry was killed, so I let you know. But I never thought you'd investigate. I figured you'd tell the police." "I tried. They didn't care." "Or your parents. I hoped there was a way to get someone to look into Henry's death, to wonder why somebody would murder a hippopotamus. I just didn't realize how far up it all went." "You mean to JJ?" Doc scratched his chin thoughtfully, watching the baby wildebeest as it took its first stumbling steps. "I don't know. He's not the cleanest businessman in the world, I'll tell you that. He's never up to exactly what he says he is. He's planning to build thrill rides in the park." Doc turned his back to me, stunned. "Where?" "Through the exhibits." I quickly explained how I'd found out and what happened to my parents as a result. Doc shook his head. "I should have known. I knew this place was too good to be true." He spat in the dirt. "So your parents told you to come to me?" "No, but I figured you might know what's going on." "How so?" "You do all the autopsies around here." Doc stared at me a long moment, then broke into a smile. "Your mother always said you were smart." "Why are all the animals that died from South America?" "Because that's where the emeralds are from." That revelation caught me off guard. It took me a moment to collect my thoughts. Emeralds? What emeralds? "Sorry, I should start at the beginning." Doc rubbed his eyes. He looked tired and worn out, like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Something seemed to be weighing on him. "I think Martin Delgado killed Henry." Even though I'd considered Martin as a suspect before, I was still surprised to hear his name. "Why?" "Because he killed all the other animals. All the ones from the Amazon?" Doc held up a hand, signaling me to be quiet. "I'll explain it all. Just sit and listen." I did as I was told, finding a spot of shade under the tree. Nearby, the baby wildebeest staggered to its mother and took its first drink of milk from her teats. "Before Fun Jungle, Martin ran a dozen other companies for JJ, and they all made money," Doc said. "However, this place was the brass thing. If Martin made it a success, he'd become JJ's right-hand man. But if he failed, JJ would want a fall guy. Now, Martin's a very good businessman. That's why JJ picked him. Unfortunately, the zoo business doesn't like any other business because at a zoo, your main attractions are alive. Martin didn't get that. He didn't know squat about animals, and he didn't bother to learn. He figured they were like cars or soup or detergent. He thought he could make them do whatever he wanted, but of course he couldn't, and so he made mistakes. Like choosing a baby hippo for the mascot. Right. Every keeper knew that was idiocy, but when they tried to protest, he didn't listen. All those mistakes started to pile up. He made dozens over the years, and each cost money. Exhibits had to be designed over and over again. Construction fell behind schedule. Animals died. The park started to hemorrhage money. Martin cooked the books to hide that from JJ, but he knew he couldn't get away with it for long. So he started looking for a way to line his pockets before he got canned. That's where the emeralds come in. My phone buzzed. I checked it and saw it was Summer calling. It was the 10th time she tried to reach me. I ignored the call and stuffed the phone back in my pocket. JJ owns a jewel importing business, Doc said. Martin ran it for a while, so he had contacts at the emerald mine in Venezuela. He arranged for them to smuggle stones to him and figured out how to get them across the border without anyone noticing. The animals, I said. Exactly. Customs agents don't pay much attention to animals. Animals can be dangerous. The agents know enough to check their cages for contraband, but they never think to look inside the animals. Heck, they'd need an x-ray machine to do it. Martin got the emeralds inside the animals? How? The mine set up a shady animal distributor, and Martin arranged contracts with Fun Jungle. Whenever he needed a new shipment of emeralds, he sent a request for big animals like an anaconda or a jaguar. They'd go out and catch one out in the wild, which is totally illegal, then do a little surgery, sewing a pouch of jewels inside the animal. Customs never noticed. Of course, the animals usually got sick because the surgery wasn't done right, but that didn't bother Martin. In fact, it made his job easier, because when they died, he had a legitimate reason for having me cut them open to get his emeralds out, rather than having to make one up. But why'd you help him? Doc wavered a moment, as though he didn't want to admit the next part. My daughter. She's an actual member of the Animal Liberation Front. She means well, but sometimes she doesn't think things through. She was involved in an attack on the meat packing plant last year. She managed to keep anyone from finding out she was involved, except Martin. The jerk listened in on the phone calls and overheard her. Then he blackmailed me. If I didn't do his dirty work, he'd turn Susie into the FBI. That's why you couldn't go public with the news that Henry had been killed if Martin didn't want you to. Doc nodded. I'd hated every minute of this, watching animals die for no good reason and not being able to do a damn thing about it. It goes against everything I believe in. It's been 100 times when I wanted to call in the police, but I love my daughter. Was Martin the person in the operating room the day I came there? Yes. I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I was surprised you were there, and with the jack, no less. I probably shouldn't have taken it from you, but I panicked. I was afraid Martin would come through the door any moment and see you. That's why I told you to go to your parents before you did anything else. I nodded, realizing I'd completely misjudged Doc all along. He hadn't really been angry at me all those times. He'd only wanted me to keep my distance for my own safety. Did you keep any evidence against Martin? I asked. Tons. Doc pulled out his keychain and unclipped a portable flash drive. It's all on here. Detailed accounts, photos, everything. We need to get it to JJ. But I thought you said he was corrupt. That doesn't mean he likes people killing his animals. Once you show him that Martin's the real culprit here, he'll make sure justice is served. But your daughter. Doc shook his head. I can't protect her anymore. Your parents are in trouble now because of all of this. You're in trouble. I can't sit by and watch anymore. My daughter made her mistakes. Now she'll have to pay for them. He got to his feet, looking like it was a struggle, as though he was burdened by what he was just about to do to his daughter. I almost felt bad about what I had to say next. The thing is, Doc, none of this proves Martin killed Henry. Doc paused, thinking. No, I suppose it doesn't. But I do have proof that Martin's been responsible for many other animal deaths here, and I know he hated Henry. He always called that hippo the greatest mistake he'd ever made. He couldn't wait for him to die. He even fantasized about killing him. I recorded him in my lab one day. The audio clip's on the flash drive, too. I had to admit it. It seemed like a pretty good case, although something still bothered me about it all. Before I could say anything, the sound of engines cut through silence. The newborn wildebeest and its mother looked up, startled, while a herd of impala stampeded away in fear. 2 Land Rovers crested a rise in the distance, coming fast. I instantly knew that meant trouble. No one was supposed to drive quickly inside Safari Land for fear of harming the animals. Security, Doc said. They must know you're here. He hustled me into his truck. By the time I'd buckled my seatbelt, he was already had it in gear, and we rocketed away in a cloud of dust. Behind us, the security Land Rovers gunned their engines and took up the chase.